Hello, friends. Welcome to Heidi's Colorful Colorado. I'm your host, Heidi Ganal, a wife, mom of four, CU Regent, and the founder of Camp Bow Wow and the She Factor. With a passion for keeping the spirit of our state alive and well, I started this podcast to bring the people of Colorado together to celebrate the amazing state we call home. Come along on this journey with me as I travel across our old country roads in my vintage RV, interviewing folks that embody the true spirit of the Rocky Mountains. From the Front Range to the Mile High City to the Wild West of Southern Colorado, we'll celebrate the history, beauty, and Coloradans that make this place the colorful state it is. Each week, you'll meet people trailblazing the way for an even more colorful future for us all, making a huge difference along the way. Are you ready for a Rocky Mountain ride? Let's do this, Colorado. Welcome, everyone, to Heidi's Colorful Colorado. I am so blessed to have a friend and just an amazing warrior for kids and school safety on the front lines here, Beverly Kingston from the University of Colorado. Bev, I'll let you talk a little bit more about your bio and in details because you've got such an incredible background, but welcome.
Oh, thank you so much, Heidi. I'm really glad to be here.
Tell us how you got into this field, and then we'll talk about what's going on. But I want to hear a little bit about your background.
Oh, gosh. Well, it's a little bit complicated. So we'll see how far back I should go. But what I do now is I direct the Center for the Study and Prevention of Violence at the University of Colorado Boulder. And it's an incredible job and an incredible honor to work for the university. And in order really to do justice about my background, I guess I'll say that I've had a sense that our world could be better for a long time. Mm-hmm. And in my undergrad, I was an undergrad a long time ago. So it was 1985 to 89. I studied justice, morality, and constitutional democracy. And, it was like, what in the world are you going to do with that? And I didn't know, but I just knew I loved learning about the foundations of our country. I loved learning about how can we make society better and that we can, that things can be made better. So I was like kind of on fire about all that. But then I had a daughter when I was 21, right at the same term I graduated. So I was a young mom and kind of, like lots of young people today, but back then we were in a recession and it was tough to find a job. So I had a lot of soul searching, and it took me a while to find like a job, but the job I found, I still wasn't doing what in my heart, I knew I was supposed to do, even though I didn't know what that was. And a lot of things happened that I can't talk about because it'll take too long, but I ended up working for an organization called Texans War on Drugs. And when I did that, it was just a short job because they lost all their funding, which is kind of how things work in the grant world. And this was 1995. But what I got exposed to is community mobilization and how communities could come together to make social change. And, that was a focus on drug prevention. But after I lost my job, I started working in the Gulfton community in Southwest Houston. And it was amazing because at that time we got $1 million from the state. But at the same time, the state, the local government, the neighborhood, and then we started to get funding from the feds. All of it all came into alignment in this amazing way to do work in this one neighborhood that had the highest juvenile crime rate of Harris County, which is the county that Houston's in. And I loved what I was doing. I mean, loved it. But I had this question: how do we know what we're doing if what we're doing is working? And that was my question. I needed to know, were we doing the best things we could be doing for our kids and communities? And how would we, how do we know that? So I started working with some evaluators, but I didn't know myself, like how to set up a study or how to, it's really complex what we were doing. And we didn't have much resources going into the evaluation. And so it just wasn't really coming together the way I thought it could, but I didn't know how to fix it. And so I decided to go to graduate school. And I applied to schools all over the country. I studied sociology, and at the last minute, it's so fun to talk to tell you this story because it's a CU Boulder story. Yeah. At the very last minute, I was at a conference in Washington, D.C., where Dr. Del Elliott, who is at that time was a professor, distinguished professor at CU Boulder, was presenting on the Blueprints programs, and they're evidence-based programs proven, to work to reduce violence. And he was trying to get the word out about, we have these proven programs. And I was like, we do? What are they? And how can I learn about them? And how can I study with you, Dal? And so I added CU Boulder to my list, and I got in, and fortunately I was out of state. So they gave me full funding, covered my tuition. I got a research, I started out with a teaching assistant position. So that made my tuition covered, and they, it was just awesome. So then I got connected to the center. Del, I came here, but Del didn't know me. So I started as a volunteer at the center, and I then got on with Columbine happening, because I started in 1999, fall of 1999, right after Columbine. And so the center was very involved in Columbine and school safety. And I ended up helping to lead the evaluation of the Safe Community, Safe Schools program that the center started right after Columbine. But that's the story, and it's been incredible. I've gotten such a great education. I couldn't have picked a better mentor.
It's amazing.
The best. So that's the story.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in the suburbs of Detroit.
Did you?
And yeah, and then I moved to Houston because of the recession. My husband at the time couldn't get a teaching job in Michigan, and so we moved, and there were a lot of teaching jobs in Houston.
Interesting. So you're a Texas girl, a little bit of Texas girl.
Yeah, a little Texas. I'm a little all over. I love Texas.
A little bit of Michigan too. So how does that work when we play football? So your bullet plays against Michigan. That's testy.
Yeah.
That's fun. Okay, so you got here right after Columbine, which actually was a horrible moment for the state of Colorado and really changed a lot of things for our state, and really changed the country and the DNA of the country, and how we deal with schools and school safety and teen mental health. So talk a little bit about, if you can, the journey from Columbine to now. We're in the middle of the STEM school shooting right now. Have things changed for the better, the worse? Where are we?
Oh gosh, Heidi, that is such a huge question and an important question. So let me kind of give you the landscape from my perspective. So in terms of crisis response, that's something, so school safety is comprehensive, and there's lots of pieces of it. One of the things after Columbine that we saw, that everyone saw, I watched it when I was in Texas on TV. We watched the media, we watched, the law enforcement not going into the school. And after that, law enforcement practices changed dramatically, so that law enforcement responds, they have so much training in responding immediately. Crisis response is a lot better than it ever was. And a lot of resources went into improving police response. Still necessary to have resources going to that. There's still more learning there. And that is really good. I think, I don't know the details, we just had the Boulder shooting, but I'm not privy to that information, but from just what I saw in the response, it looked pretty incredible. Another thing that we have done really well since Columbine is, in Colorado, could still be better, but we're doing good in the fact that we have Safe to Tell. Yeah. And Safe to Tell is an anonymous bystander reporting system. In every school shooting, we see that, not every, but most, I'll say about 80%, 85%, 80 to 85, the shooter, attacker told someone what they were going to do. Okay, so that happens. Also, around 93% of the time of any of these incidents, other people saw warning signs. You know, they saw things that were concerning. They saw behavior changes. They even maybe saw weapons being stockpiled. I mean, stuff that isn't right. And so we learned that right away after Columbine. And it took us a while in Colorado to put Safe to Tell together. Back then, it was Ken Salazar was the Attorney General, and Ken, Dr. Del Elliott, and Susan Payne, who was the founder of Safe to Tell, they traveled around the state of Colorado, probably kind of like you are in this podcast, listening to kids and listening to what they needed and listening to community. And they said over and over again, we do see things, but we don't have a way that we feel safe to tell. We don't feel like we don't have an anonymous way to report. We're afraid to report, you know, things like that. And so that was what birthed that project. And now bystander reporting systems, they're not everywhere in the nation like we have 911, but they are in many different states. You know, my hope is that we'll have them be something like 911, that we will have a way to report that is anonymous. Now, given what's happened, I can talk a long time, so sorry about this. Okay, let me just say a little bit more. With the pandemic and us learning about, you know, some of the difficulties in police response in communities of color, in Colorado, Safe to Tell is answered by law enforcement. So every tip potentially goes to law enforcement. We're also thinking about how can we design a system. Well, let me say this. In those communities, they're not using Safe to Tell. So that it's there, but I don't think that I think there's an issue around feeling safe, knowing it's going to go to law enforcement, and what might that mean? And so it doesn't mean that law enforcement would necessarily do a bad response or anything like that, but it's a delicate situation. So we're looking at how can we create anonymous reporting systems that are community answered. And then the community can then decide how it can go to law enforcement. So that's something that we haven't put into place yet, but we're really looking at how we might build those kinds of systems. The third area that I'll say is also, we've come far since Columbine, is in threat assessment. And threat assessment is basically a process by which a school team, it's typically an administrator, a school psychologist, and ideally someone from law enforcement, at least those three, sometimes it's a teacher, come together and they assess a case to see, does this really pose a threat? And there's a protocol that they should be following, and then the cases should be managed afterwards, ongoing, because sometimes they, you know, it might not seem like it's the kid or adult is posing a threat immediately, but life circumstances can change that then trigger things to become a bigger threat, like, you know, what we're seeing in COVID, and, you know, in how something can happen in someone's life personally. So that process has also been studied and developed, still needs a lot more studying. We have an evaluation going right now with the Colorado School Safety Resource Center to evaluate their threat assessment protocol. They've been leaders in the state of really getting a protocol out, trying to get it to as many schools as possible. A gap is community threat assessment. So we're doing a lot better in K through 12. I think we're also doing fairly well in university settings. We've learned a lot in universities. But what about if they're not in those systems? Yeah. What do we do in the community? So those are things we've learned. I'll just talk to you a little bit about what hasn't happened. And the thing that really hasn't happened is there's a lot more that we know about preventing violence and the root causes, the programs that are effective, the infrastructure we could be building as a society. People don't know what that is. And it's like the best kept secret. Like I stay hopeful all the time because I know violence can be prevented. I know at least 30% we could have reductions, at least. But I believe it will be exponential if we invest in what works to prevent violence.
It feels like we are investing in like the government is spending so much money on all these programs. And one of the things that bothers me, and I've told you this at CU, and just being someone who came from the business community and now is in government, the bureaucracy, is there's no like manage what you can't manage what you don't measure. And there's no commitment to looking at what return on investment is on the dollars that you're putting into these programs. And that's what I love about the Blueprints program that you guys set out. It's really data-based, but it's missing completely in school safety, as we've talked about before. Yeah. How do we get people to wake up and start paying attention to where those dollars are being spent? Because they're so precious.
So precious. But I will say it might seem like a lot of dollars are being spent on this, but it's not really compared to what we need to be investing into. It's just like anything else. And it's just going to cost some money to fix these problems. They're not, they've been here a long time. They're generation after generation, and they're sort of baked into our society. Yeah. We can unbake them. And so I think that we're going to need to do some upfront significant investment. Now, also with what you asked of, how do we build these, I call it like an infrastructure to evaluate what we're doing. So certainly there's probably funds going to things that there could be funds going to things that don't work at all, that we know don't work. There's probably a lot of funds going to things that might work or might not, but they're not being evaluated. One of the best things to start with is that, well, there are a couple things I'm going to say. One would be, if you're in that, every program that's out there, anyone who's doing anything should be doing what we call a process evaluation, or evaluating the implementation of what you're doing. They should have a theory of change that's grounded in science of why they're doing what they're doing and how they think it should work. They should have a protocol of, you have this, I'm sure, in business of, in your, what's it called? When you replicate businesses, how they all probably have to follow a similar franchise. Yeah, thank you. I'm a researcher, but you have to follow a similar model. And so you should be having a model that you're following, and then making sure that you're getting those benchmark measures and achieving those things. Now, there's several ways to do that. I mean, even cost-effective ways, like for example, in schools, they could be doing a climate survey, and, many districts are doing a climate survey. Many districts aren't. They can be doing that Colorado Healthy Kids survey, which also gives them data at the school level. Let's see what else they can be doing. And so I'm sort of talking about those programs that, well, any program should be doing a process evaluation, but there's also, because we do have the Blueprints programs, we do have evidence-based programs. We know so much about what works to prevent violence. We should absolutely be using that knowledge and using those programs whenever we're taking something to scale. So when you're piloting something, pilot it, do something small and evaluate it. Then you take it to scale after it's got randomized trials. I mean, we saw this in COVID. I mean, this is why some people are still scared of the shot. The shot has had randomized trials, has had science showing its effectiveness, but we know it can't have had long-term follow-up over many years. The programs that are on the Blueprint list, we try to follow those same kind of randomized trial studies, where then we want to see that the effect was sustained for at least a year. There's no harmful effects. It's replicated by at least 2 studies, that the studies are very high quality studies. So it means that not a lot of programs make it to that list. And just like any science, think what you pay on pharmaceuticals, it costs that much to do, it costs maybe not that much, but it costs money to evaluate these programs. And we're not investing in that.
Interesting. I think part of the problem is it's so politically divided, right? The issue of school safety and how to solve these problems. And I think as we get back to school after COVID and things start to ramp up around this topic again, we have an opportunity to take a step back and right now we can take a deep breath and say, what actually are programs that we absolutely know work, that have to be the basic building blocks in every school? Yeah. And then let's layer them on or try or pilot things. But I think there's so many good people with good intentions on this front. Some great people who have been through so much trauma that have tried to give back and help and create programs or nonprofits. But to your point, they don't have the science behind them to say that this or that works. So let's let them do their work. But the precious resources we have, let's invest it in what you guys know absolutely works. And one thing that really bugs me a lot, since I've known you for many years, is that we've got you, the center, this incredible group of researchers and people working on this issue right here in Colorado. And yet everyone nationally knows about you guys, but I don't think you're as well known as we'd like you to be in Colorado and doing a lot of the work here in our own our very beloved state. So why do you think that's the case?
Well, I think one big reason, so our center is grant funded, and we have been since it started in 1992. I mean, that's how long it's been going. And Del started the center, to bridge the gap between research and practice. And he was getting all the, learning so much from those longitudinal studies, the National Youth Survey and the Denver Youth Survey. And he's like, this info isn't getting out to people who need it. And then he was also seeing Colorado spending quite a bit of money on programs that they didn't know if they worked. And at that time, even programs that didn't work, that was when we had quite a bit, I don't know what Colorado was spending on, if they were spending money on Scared Straight, but boot camps, those kinds of programs, a lot of the target hardening can actually have sometimes harmful effects, not work, but actually harm people. And you wouldn't think that, but the thing is, and we know the university is strapped for resources, but we're 100% grant funded as an organization. And we don't have funds to help us communicate what we're doing or just to serve the public. So what we can do, we have to work on the grant projects, and that's pretty much our full capacity. And a little bit I can do these things like podcaster, but not a lot, because I'm mostly having to run the projects, and we don't have that capacity.
It'd be amazing if we could have a field force where you guys directed, communications folks to go out and work with the schools one-on-one, help them. And School Safety Resource Center is very understaffed too. And so, hey, legislators, if you're listening, this is a way you can help. And parents, you can encourage your local congressman or your local legislator to, help fund the work that you're doing up at CU. That one thing I want to kind of touch on before we shift to happier topics is, why are there so many shootings in Colorado? Do you have any insight into that?
I wish I had answers. I know that it's true that there are more shootings in Colorado. And, in fact, after the Boulder shooting, I called Del and we talked about that a little, like why? And we don't know. We don't know if it's, are people thinking like it's something, I don't know, extra special to do a mass shooting in Colorado? I don't know. That's just, we don't know. And there is that copycat kind of thing that does happen. And there's, that's not necessarily my expertise in that psychological realm. And our science doesn't show us, why. We also know we have, we've seen high youth suicide rates in Colorado as well. And I guess, maybe I can go a little bit into the, my hope for the state and in some of the Colorado spirit kind of question, because, my hope is that we will come together and use there's a spirit in Colorado that we can make things happen here. We can get things done. We can do really good work. And there is an independence. I know, working with schools, as you probably have seen, every school, it's local control. everything's local control. And I love that. Like, but then sometimes we're not sharing the information. It's like, yes, we need the local control for sure to make it our own. Everyone has to make it all their own. And that's so good. But we don't always coordinate as much in the state. So I worry about maybe some of that. Like we could have better, we're working hard on it with, I mean, our state partners are amazing. Community partners are amazing. And I think we're really trying to come together but collaboration even requires like an infrastructure funded. So, because if each agency is just out for their own, then just in survival, it's hard to have that cross network.
Boy, I've seen that in the school safety efforts. That it seems it's just like right in front of you. You can see the silos and the different people who are fighting for the precious dollars to work on their projects.
Yeah.
And, honestly, I think as a mom and as a public leader, I want to shout from the rooftops. This has to be one of the most important things that we talk about. Last week, Children's Hospital said we were having a youth mental health crisis. They've never done that before.
I know.
And so I just want to shake everybody down in downtown Denver at the Capitol. Like, come on, guys, like this should be one of the only things we're talking about right now. And as we head back into school, it's going to manifest with suicide rates rising and mental health emergency room visits going through the roof. And this is going to show up in lots of crazy ways. And I just think we're not talking about it. We don't hear much about it at all in the press. So
yeah.
right now,
I mean, it tends to be that we don't hear about it until after something horrible happens.
Yeah.
And that is one of the things that why we stay focused on violence prevention. And, in violence prevention, we think about averting violence, like Safe to Tell oftentimes averts things from happening, intervening so that somebody maybe who is starting on that pathway doesn't continue. We have those evidence-based programs to address that. We also, I'm just thinking about there's also like the cure violence kinds of approaches where you really go in there and you interrupt violence. And we're going to be dealing with all that stuff until we create a society that violence is lower. And, that's not going to probably be in my lifetime, but we can plant the seeds right now because we do know so much. And I think you're right. People do, if we can shake them now, it's kind of like the pre-COVID or when COVID first happened and we're like, oh my God, we don't have anything, and it's like, if we would have known to wear masks back then, we could have had so many less deaths, or, if we just paid attention to like a little bit of the science, did those things and knew and had an infrastructure. And so I hope that we can build that. And I'll also share one of the projects we're working on with the National Association of School Resource Officers. We have a federal grant to work with them on we're just like launching the official name. So I'm not going to quite say it out loud right now, but it's under the grant proposal, it's called a standardized violence prevention protocol. And it's kind of trying to get out, we'll have this information publicly available. People can train other people, those core components of school safety, of what needs to be in place so that everybody knows them, everyone can put them in place, everyone knows how to like measure that they're in place. And I mean, if we can do that nationally, like that would be amazing.
Let's make sure you can do that. Let's get funding and support. I mean, I think we met when I was on the governor's school safety committee back in 2014, 15. And we were having these same conversations. And I know how long this stuff takes to work, but I think parents are really in tune to what's going on in our schools right now. So perhaps parents who are listening to this podcast can follow you guys in the work that you're doing. And I'll have you tell them how to do that in just a second. And bring it to their schools, bring it to their PTAs, their PTOs, their administrators, and don't take no for an answer. Say, we have got to be part of this, and we won't take no for an answer. But let's shift to happier things. Tell me, because
let's just say this. Let me say this happy thing is that I want to say to everyone that I've been doing this work for a long time, and I still stay so positive because I do know that we can do this. We can prevent violence. So I just want for people to have that same hope that I have, and it really is possible.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that, because I think people have given up right now on that idea, and we do need hope, and we need hope so badly right now in our society, in our relationships, in our communities. So part of that leads to Colorado. What a special community is this is. So tell me what you think the spirit of Colorado is.
Oh my gosh. Well, I said a little bit. To me, there's something about like the mountains and the beauty that well, you can see I have a picture like behind me of mountains, and that I guess it gives me hope. It almost like says what's impossible is possible. And this is funny because when I lived in Texas, my faith was just starting to grow, and I won't go too much into it, but I got this picture. It was one of those, I thought it cost a really lot of money at the time. It probably cost me like $100. And it was flowers in the snow. And it said, with God, all things are possible. And I put it in my dining room, and okay, I had never seen flowers in the snow before. I like that picture was like, oh my God. And then, like the first year I moved to Colorado, like I think it snowed on Mother's Day. And it's like, I'm like flowers in the snow, or every year we see flowers in the snow. And I don't know, there's something about that I really feel here in the state. And it really nurtures me, that spirit.
That's a great analogy. And there is nothing more beautiful than seeing a flower in the snow. So I think we're past that point now. Hopefully we're in the summer. You never know here. Okay.
I know. I think it looks like
one last question for you. What's the most Colorado thing you've ever done, Beverly?
Okay. Well, I'm not a super athletic person. So I'm going to say my most Colorado thing is going to the hot springs, the Strawberry Park hot springs. And I never even knew before Colorado, I didn't really even understand hot springs or even know what they were. And I was just blown away the first time. Like we drove up there, I'm like on that kind of rocky road, and my dad was driving and he was like, and he's from Michigan. It was not a peaceful drive for us. We didn't have the right car, but we got up there, and I mean, we all were like, oh my God, this is incredible. They're just built right into the mountain and the views. And so I would say that's my most Colorado.
Stinky like hot springs?
They're stinky a little bit, but it's like the feel. I don't know, the water. I've gone to a lot of different hot springs so far now. Like that's one of my goals, to go to like as many as possible in my lifetime in Colorado. So
that's a cool goal. Like some people have 14ers and you have hot springs.
Yeah, that's more my style. I'm just not that. Like I run a lot, but I sort of get scared to run on trails too much by myself, and I'm just not that adventurous.
14ers are a lot of work. Everybody thinks it's just, let's go do a 14er, and then you're up there and you're like, oh my God.
I'm not. But my husband, I'll just say, is that that person. So he's done. Like I asked him that question, and he's like, I would just say like he's climbed the Black Canyon. He's ridden, all across the state. So he'd be the better answer. But I like the hot springs.
I think that's a good answer. I haven't heard that one yet. So that's good. That's good. Okay. Well, Beverly, so blessed to have you on here and doing the work that you do. You are such a gift to our community. And so is the center. So tell people how they can follow along if they're interested.
Well, this is one of our issues. We don't have a great, we have a website, which I'll have you get. Can you give the link to the website on your?
We can do that.
If you could do that, that would be great, because I don't know it all by heart.
Exactly. We need to create a really simple website for you guys.
Okay.
URL.
And we don't have we're not on any social media. So I'm sorry. We just don't have that position. And okay. I want to, but we will one day.
That's all right. I think even if people go to the blueprints, if you Google blueprints, Colorado school safety, there are an incredible number of resources and programs that people can find out about or research about. But also, just following you guys in the press, because you write a lot of articles and talk about things in the press. And so I think that's
we do try to keep our website up to date with press stuff that we do, and we're going to add like our publications. We don't have that yet on the website, but we have a bunch of publications. If you Google the blueprints, and I didn't give you exactly the website name, but if you Google CSPV, and it's University of Colorado, we come up really fast. So just use CSPV in the acronym. If and also you'll have the link to us in your notes, I hope.
Absolutely. And I'll post it when we post the podcast on social media. But thank you so much for all you do. Give all of your team a hug for me and tell them thank you. And, I look forward to you keeping such a positive attitude and keeping us focused on the idea that we can solve this problem, because us moms really need to hear that right now. So
we can, and we need you all moms, all of you with us, so I'm glad to speak to all the moms.
And the dads. We want the dads.
Yeah.
Sorry, dads. I didn't mean to leave you out.
Right. And the grandparents and
aunts, uncles, teachers, everybody. This is a big problem we got to solve. But I know you guys are on it. And that's why I thought it was so important to have you on the podcast and get your voice out there. So thank you so much again. And I hope you get to go visit some hot springs this summer.
I do too. I'm trying.
Thank you for joining us today on Heidi's Colorful Colorado. If you enjoyed this conversation, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. And definitely follow me on Instagram to keep up with my latest adventures. In the meantime, happy trails from me, Heidi Ganahl.